what is the quirkiest horse you've trained or driven, and what were his strange habits?
Probably Primetime Bobcat. He would see anything on the track, and he many times has leaped over things that we swore weren't there, but they were in his eyes.
The one horse I have that's my favorite horse of all time, that's, for me as owner, driver, I owned a horse named Time All Colossus, and he's very quirky. If you just move your hands just like this, he'll kind of flinch back. And I don't know why he does it, because no one's ever touched him or anything, but he does it. Even in the race, if someone kind of waves their whip, he'll shake his head. And you kind of have to work around it, and you can't overreact because he's not going to make a break. But he'll still make those movements, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I thought you were going to run here," and you're kind of thinking to yourself, "Well, I knew I wasn't."
No one would ever hear of him, but there was a presidential ball horse. His name was President's Ball. Dave Downey ended up with him up in Dresden way, and he was the goofiest horse ever. As soon as he got the bike clicked on or the jog cart clicked on over his back, he was absolutely nutty. But without the harness and bridle and stuff on, he was a sweetheart in the barn. It was really weird.
A likely Peaceful Way was maybe the quirkiest horse I've ever driven for a caliber horse, because you really never knew when you were going in behind the gate what to expect from her. Sometimes she wanted to charge out of there. Other times when you wanted to charge out of there, she didn't. And if she didn't want to, you better not ask her to. And if she did want to, you better not try not to, because she had a mind of her own, and if you tried to go against it, it usually didn't work.
I've driven a lot of little, jogged and trained a lot of horses with little quirks and anything, but I remember just when I was starting to first sit on a race bike, my dad sent me out on a horse called Casper to warm her up. And she used to just bunny hop all the time, and you swore she was going to throw the boots at you all the time. And so you really had to play with her mouth and keep her attention. If not, you were worried about what might come after, that's all.
We're racing one today, Little Heart's Desire, and she doesn't steer that good, and she's been a project all along. She likes to stop and start, and lately she's been okay, but the ones that stop and don't want to go are frustrating.
Well, probably one I got right now is probably the Fancy Shot. He's probably the fastest horse I think I ever trained, trotter or pacer, and he just takes it in his head that sometimes he just pull up, and he just, for no reason whatsoever during the race, he'll just stop and for no reason. But he trotted in 54, come last quarter in 27 seconds, and the next week at the half he just decided he was just going to turn around and go the other way, and that's him. You just never know which one's going to show up.
I suppose the most recent that I've had is a horse called Carnivore, and he was just, for some reason, when you brought him out of the stall and tried to hook him in the cart, he would just go crazy every time. When you got him hooked up on the track, he was fine, and then when you brought him back to unhook him, he just went goofy. That's the most recent one.
Well, one of Tom Harmer's dad had this year was named Lucky Jet. He was funny. He was real fast, and he'd go 26 second quarter and just turn his head sideways like this. It's pretty neat. I've never really seen a horse going that fast doing something like that. He doesn't even realize how fast he was. So that was pretty cool.
I've driven quite a few trotters that were pretty tricky. There's one trot in Philly, Amy's Image. I remember all what she'd do was just run post braiding, but when you put her on the gate, she'd switch to the trot. She made a lot of money.
Probably Stickman Mo. He was a really grabby trotter, and he made me sweat a few times. He ran off on me on the gallop, and that was pretty scary.
Secret Weapon was probably up there. He's a preferred horse, so he's all class. But he has little things about him that you have to watch him and stuff. Like if you can tell when he's on one line in post braid what he's going to be racing like, and I could notice if he was really grabbing on in post braid, he was going to be good, and if he was kind of dead, then he didn't have much pop to him. But I guess he'd be one of my horses that I kind of got to know the more I drove him, and I knew when he was going to be good or just okay.
Broadcaster in or something like that. Broadcaster in, and like he would race with no check, and he was a pacer, and after the race Like he wouldn't walk with a lead chain. He would follow the groom with no lead chain or nothing. He was just like a dog, you know what I mean? He was a nice horse. No, you know, he was like a 20 claimer, but he was just like a human being, that horse.
I drove a horse one time that turned around on me going to the quarter pole back home. So that'd be the trickiest. I had one horse that you couldn't, you had to jog him around and you had to turn him right behind the gate, and that's the only way. He put his nose on the gate, and the gate would have to move right away to get him to go, and that was a horse named Jersey Buddy. I had him about 30 years ago, and if everything didn't go his way, that was it. He turned around, go the other way, and he wouldn't go. But he was the funniest little horse I ever drove.
Probably top-notcher. He was the type of horse that didn't want to train, and if you beat a mile in 2:30, you were doing very good that day.
Haas of the Colors was a particularly fun horse. Fun that he was a little bit nasty and playful, but he was one of my favorites. Mystician is a horse that I enjoy a lot. He's kind of got some similarities. He can be a bit of a jerk, a little bit antisocial, and Santana Blue Chip was a horse that I really enjoyed. We played with, we'd play in the stall, and he'd let me lift his front end off the ground or make it look like I was. Anyway, he'd stand on his back legs. So those are three that come to mind.
Well, one horse I looked after in Florida, his name was Wild Abandon, I think. He was a young trotter, 3-year-old, and he had no top teeth. And it was kind of funny. He was a great big stud colt, a big speedy crown, and you could literally put your hand right in his mouth, and he'd just kind of suck on it like a lollipop. It was bizarre, and people would see me with my hand stuck in this horse's mouth and think I'm crazy, but they didn't realize he didn't have any top teeth. So he was quirky. He just liked to play around and was kind of a big kid.
I used to have a horse that went so slow when I was training him and scoring out of there, and he'd go the half just as slow as possibly go. Kick once, and then he'd be gone. Come a half as fast as he can. That's all he ever was trained. That's all I trained him all his life, because that seemed to be what he liked. He always raced good. But if he didn't put that kick in, or if you were going to the gate with him, he always kicked going to the gate. If he did, it took a pretty good horse to beat him.
I've driven a lot of crazy horses, and one time I drove this 2-year-old first lifetime start, and I went out onto the track, and the guy said, just don't pay attention. He's going to hump back a few times, but he's never kicked before. And meanwhile, anyone who knows me, I'm petrified of kickers because of this horse. And the tail, he started humping, and no big deal. The tail tie broke, and he kicked me right in the chest and kicked me right off the bike, and that has scarred me for life.
We used to have this trotter named Devil's Magic, and he had one eye. Well, he had two eyes, but the other one was all mangled. And he was one homely looking horse, just gangly, and he got all sideways all the time, and he would stall walk like 100 miles an hour. Like you could not slow him down. And he was a great big horse. You'd come in the morning, and his stall would be black, and we tried everything, tires and balls and this and that, and nothing worked. And he would really motor around his stall.
I just got rid of a trot filly. Her name was Sapphire. She was pretty much just very crazy.
Quirkiest horse I've driven was actually the last one I drove here 20 minutes ago, Dapper Denzel. The trainer, Arnold Marks, he's tried all kinds of rigging on him, and it's just he's really hard to figure out. He bears in and he bears out, and you just don't know when he's going to do it. And even going to the gate, sometimes you'll feel like he's just going to swipe everyone out and just go right wacko. But other times, like he raced really well tonight, sometimes he has a big kick of speed and he can go fast. He's a really, he's a fast horse. He has a ton of speed, but he's just hard to handle is basically the best way to put it.
Well, we had one horse named, we don't know how to make more, Red Star Chip. He'd stick out his tongue on command. Just tap him in the mouth and the tongue would come out. He's quite a character.
I drove one for Blair Burgess, Friendly Amigo. It could be almost a runaway at times, or if you got it going, it was a very fast horse, and it's probably the best horse I've ever driven.
I used to drive a horse named Joko years ago, and it's the only time I ever got in an accident. And
if I wanted him to go left, he'd go right, and if I wanted him to stop, he'd go, and if I wanted him to go up, he'd go down, and sure enough, that's what he did one day at Grand River, and I got in an accident, and it wasn't fun, but I didn't get hurt, and it's a moment that I'll always remember.
I would say one of the quirkiest horses that I have right now. I mean, there's been so many over the years, of course, but Wake Up Peter is very, very quirky. Like, he likes things his way. He likes things on his schedule. He likes his routine. You know, he wants you to work around him, not vice versa. So, you know, we let him be what he wants to be because, you know, he pays us off for it on the racetrack. But when he gets ready in the morning, he wants to come out of the stall at his own speed. He wants to walk out the door at his own speed. Everything's on his schedule. So that's part of the reason he has that name as well.
I think one horse that gave me a lot of headaches, he ended up making $750,000, but I always thought he could have made $1.5 million. But it was a horse called Kick Up a Storm. And you just fought with him I could never get him where he was relaxed and comfortable in the race. So you just kind of fought with him every race, and he, like I say, he still ended up making about $600,000. But if he would have just went with me part of the time, you know, he would have made a hell of a lot more.
I drove a horse called Delightful Dolphin, and she was one tough racehorse, but she did not like to be on the track, and you really had to be on your toes and be one step ahead of her at all times, because she could get pretty erratic, try to lay down, run off the track, refuse to start. So she always kept you on your toes and aware of what was going on.
We had a horse called Run of the Bank that would pull up on you all the time. He was one of the better colts training, but he'd only go about a half a mile and he'd stop. And we had to tow him with another horse that had a lead shank around his neck, and he ended up going on to make about $700,000 or $800,000.
I had a trotter one time. I went away on vacation for a week or 10 days, and I left my younger sister to look after my stable at the time. And my older brother, who's never been, well, he's terrified of horses, never been around horses, I guess he thought it was a good idea for him to go out and check on her and visit. And so she got the bright idea to let him jog this horse. And like anybody that's never been around horses before, like the horse was a perfect gentleman when I left the barn, but when apparently he got rearing up and he got up against the side of the barn, and then he refused to go out on the racetrack after that. So my sister was in charge of running me on the track and running the horse to the gate every time after that. And again, I never let my brother near the barn, let alone jog a horse ever again.
I got a horse one time for Joe O'Brien that he sent me. His name was Ambro Worthy. He was a dream of glory, but Joe sent him up here on the pace. And I went to race him, and he run a couple of times. And the second time, we're after 2 runs, I had to qualify him. And he made a break in the qualifier, and I took him back to the barn, and barn 11, Greenwood Raceway. And I said to the groom, I said, don't take the card off him, but I said, I'm going right back out with him. I said, take those hobbles off him. And I went out and I trained him, I think in 35 or something, on the trot. And within 6 weeks, that horse was in the open at Greenwood. Ambro Worthy. He was a nice horse, but he just, you know, as a young horse, he was hurting and he couldn't trot. But, you know, he was 4 when I got him, and he was set up then, he was sound enough in that trot was his natural gait.